Hello, friends, and welcome to another RobCast. And this one is, we're going to do a series here with our beloved friend of the RobCast, Pete Rollins. Pete, welcome to the back house.
It is so good to be back in the back house.
You're back in the back house. And we're going to cover all sorts of ground over the next few episodes. But a couple things quickly. This week, depending on when you listen to this episode, this week I'm starting the Bible Belt Tour. So I'm doing Norfolk, Virginia, and then Richmond, Virginia, then Charlotte, North Carolina, then Knoxville, Tennessee, then Atlanta, Georgia, then Birmingham, Alabama, and the tour will wrap up in the home of Elvis, Memphis. And so those of you listening to the RobCast and want to come out, a couple of the cities sold out, but they've moved to bigger venues, and I know Birmingham sold out, but then they've added some standing room only seats and crammed some more people in. So I'm really looking forward to seeing you all. And then secondly, a number of you have asked about the next Communicators 2-day events. So here's what we're going to do. The next one is in October, but it's going to be different. You bring whatever you're working on. So all of you writers, speakers, people who give messages, talks, sermonizers, whoever it is, I'm going to do an event where you have a smaller group and you bring whatever you're working on, and then I work on your thing with you. Hopefully we get you unstuck, get you going, get all that. So the first dates, it's called the Something to Say Workshop. Those first dates are, it's going to be at the Improv here in Los Angeles. And the first dates are now up on the site. It's a small group, a couple spots. Then I've been doing these 2-day events on communicating, on the art of communicating. And I love talking about this. And I've been doing these 2-day events for the past 5 years or so. So I took all of the talks that I've given about communicating and I condensed them all down to one outline. And then I recorded it like a really, really long talk. And it's 7 hours and 45 minutes long. And it's now available on my site. So if that is a lot, Kristen Bell is here in the back house, that is a lot of content. This is my very best content on communicating. You know I love to talk about this. And I'm really, really, really proud of this. It's really significant to me. And so obviously I was trying to figure out how much to charge for it. And it's so many years of work. It's so many hours of content. And then I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll let you decide. So it's pay what you want, which doesn't mean $1, by the way. This is years and years of work boiled down to a little under 8 hours of content. But we're going Radiohead style and pay what you want. So there we go. Exciting things happen in the middle of the summer. But now, my friends, Pete Rollins is in the back house.
It's so exciting to be back.
Okay, so last summer, you and I were in England together doing an event, and you talked about love. Mm-hmm. I don't even think it was the main thing you were talking about.
Nope.
You touched on it, and then we were eating or walking around or talking, and I was like, that stuff you did, I love. I immediately thought, oh my word, the RobCast people would love this.
Well, and then I gave you you should saying that you should write a book on this.
This is a book.
Yeah.
And then I gave you the title because I love titles.
Yeah.
Because titles are divine, and I was like, you should call it An Introduction to Love.
Yeah.
Because that's just a fantastic. So you're gonna do the next 3 episodes. You're gonna do this, what I would call an introduction to love, but you apparently have a different title.
Yes. So I want to call this An Introduction to Making Love. But Rob is like, you know what? I'm not sure if people see that in the RobCast. I've never heard about me before. They might think this is X-rated.
What did I stumble into?
Yes. What is this? But you might get more listeners.
You know your first book, How Not to Speak of God?
Yeah.
The not was in parentheses.
Yeah.
An introduction to making could be in parentheses.
Perfect. Because making love used to be a phrase that had nothing to do with sex at all. The term making love meant the art of creating love. And what would happen is 2 people would go on a date and they would bring a chaperone. And people would think, oh, the role of the chaperone is to stop the two people doing anything untoward. But actually, the role of the chaperone was to get the people to start fantasizing about what they could do if the chaperone wasn't there. So the chaperone was literally making love. The chaperone, by creating a distance between the two people, was creating desire.
The chaperone sounds like a French word. Where does that word come from?
I'm not sure. It probably is a French word. I don't know the origins. But you think about this in terms of true love waits or conservative Christianity. I love true love waits. It's amazing. The best way to get sexuality interesting is to prohibit it. So in a place like LA where sex is, you can have sex anytime you want, there's no prohibition, that makes sex very unsexual, right? Nobody wants to, like if you want your child not to have sex, talk about it all the time. Be a hippie parent and say, oh, tell me what you did and how you touched her or how you touched him. And the child will not want to ever touch anybody ever. If
You know, the first time I was in Amsterdam, I had heard about the red light district.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, oh, I have to see this.
Yeah.
So I went to have you been to the red light district?
Oh, yeah.
And there are these women in the windows.
Yeah.
And it was the least sexy place I've ever been in my life.
Exactly, without the prohibition. So the gift that the conservative church gives to a place like LA is to prohibit, which makes it more desirous. So I think it's true that people who are involved with true love wait end up having more sex than
What's that,
people
like
who
a
aren't.
campaign or something?
Yeah, it's where people commit to not having sex until they're married. And so that's the perfect way to, have more sex, is to create the prohibition. So it's an interesting gift to the world. So this idea that actually prohibiting something creates that. So back in Ireland, you have a school where the priest is making sure that the girl and the boy don't get too close to each other, right? At the dance, and they're making sure that you don't touch. People think, oh, the priest and the nun, oh, they're stopping desire. No. The role of the Catholic Church is to create desire so that actually people get together and they actually create love. So I want this, series that we're doing to be a guide to the art of making love. And there's 3 dimensions for me. There's the theological, which I'd love to talk about today. There's the political dimension of making love, which I'd love to do the next day, the next week. And then there is the personal dimension of making love.
Okay. By the way, a woman just asked me a couple days ago, how do I get my 15-year-old to read your books?
Yeah.
I keep telling my 15-year-old won't read your books, and I keep trying to get them to read your books, and I was like, ban them.
Yes, exactly.
Prohibit them.
Exactly.
Tell them that you'd never want your 15-year-old, whatever you do, don't read Rob Bell books.
Yeah, that's what we did. That was our youth ministry in Icon. In Icon, we met in a bar, and so you said to anybody under the age of 18, oh, you can't go. That was the perfect way to make them want to go. What are we missing? What is it about? So if you want people to come when they're old enough, don't let them come. Oh, no, you wouldn't want to do that. Oh, no, you're not allowed to do that. Yep, absolutely. So there's a youth ministry tip. Don't let people come.
I always talk about not being door number 2 parents, which is, some things obviously like heroin. Let's just not do heroin, okay?
Yes.
So obviously some things you just are like against. But you can give something way more energy than it deserves.
Yeah.
And a door number 2, whatever you do, don't go behind door number 2. Avoid door number 2. We don't even talk about that. In fact, you know what? We're not even going to. And there's a number of kids, or some percentage of kids, who knows, who are like, the moment you prohibit it too much, you give it too much energy, you have now electrified it, magnetized it, and the kid is drawn to it.
Well, this is the theological dimension. This is Paul's insight, that the law that says do not do something generates the transgression, the desire to want to do it. So Paul has this incredible insight when he said everything is permissible. Not everything is beneficial, but everything
This is the Apostle Paul, one of the writers of the New Testament. Where does he say this?
Is that Corinthians? Everything is permissible. Now, people suddenly go, well, that's license. You let people do whatever they want. But actually, it's the no, the refusal to let somebody do something, which, as you say, electrifies the desire to transgress. Whereas if you say to someone, which is grace, by the way, the word grace is you're accepted as you are, whatever you're doing. Ironically, the very acceptance of grace frees you from the activity that the law binds you to. So can I take one example? A true example, there was a woman who was seen an analyst because she kept having one-night stands. She was always out at the weekend. She was sleeping around. She felt very guilty about it. What would her parents think? What would her friends think? But she thought to herself, at least I feel guilty, because at least the guilt stops me from doing it even more. I feel guilty, therefore it stops me. It puts the brakes on. But over analysis, she started to get rid of the guilt. She started to lower her guilt until she didn't feel guilty about what she was doing, until she accepted who she was and what she did. But ironically, as the guilt diminished, so did the desire to sleep around. What she thought was the obstacle was actually the very thing that was creating the desire. So that's kind of grace from a theological perspective. Weirdly, it sounds counterintuitive. You get rid of the law, you get rid of the guilt, well, then you'll do anything. No, weirdly, when you're accepted, and when you can accept that you're accepted, you become free from those things that would destroy you and would destroy your family and your society.
Oh, my word. And that's like your intro. Okay, so this episode, theological.
Making love in a theological way.
Second part, political. Third part, personal.
Yep.
Okay, and then so where are you going to take us now with theological? Is there a structure? Are there points? Where are we going to head?
Yeah, so there's a French mystic called Marguerite Porete, and she wrote this book called The Mirror of Simple Souls.
When did she live?
I think it was around the 13th century, but you'd have to check Wikipedia for that.
13th century, possibly. Marguerite
Porete.
And
she wrote this book called The Mirror of Simple Souls. It's very beautiful. It's a very strange, winding book where reason is in conversation with love, in conversation with the will. And at one point, reason is saying to love, who are you? What are you? And there's this beautiful line that says, I am God, says love. I am God, says love. And I want to start there because our last conversation series was on God, and this is on love. In a sense, they might be exploring the same thing from a different dimension. That the great poets are exploring a dimension of life that the theologians called God. And the theologians, when they explore God at their best, are actually exploring a dimension of life that is expressed in the poets. And Marguerite Porete unifies those two. So actually, this will fit very neatly with the last series. And the things I want to explore with you now will fit very neatly with the notions of God that we looked at in that series. So like the first thing that's interesting is, we looked at the idea that God is an object. God is a thing out there that we can talk about. And we looked at in the last series other ways of thinking about God and theology. Paul Tillich once said, atheism is closer to God than theism, because when we treat God as an object, atheism denies that object, and theism accepts that object. But Paul Tillich says God exists before subject and object. God is not an object. So to deny God as an object is closer to the divine than to accept God as an object.
How do you help people understand subject and object?
So an object is something that you can touch, you can taste, you can
outside
measure.
Of you.
Outside
you
of you.
stand over, above, beyond.
Yes.
You analyze, you observe, you're detached from.
Exactly. Like a scientist looks at an object that, you can poke and you can prod. But Gabriel Marcel, this philosopher, he talks about the idea of something as a mystery. A mystery is not something you can poke and prod. It's something that you're immersed in, something that impacts you, something that you do not see, but you see, but that allows you to see. So just like light, you don't see light. Light allows you to see. And in the same way, to treat this idea of the divine as an object that you see is to miss the point. It's in a sense a reality that allows us to see the world in a different way. So interesting, in the same way, you can say, well, God doesn't exist in one sense. So I want to talk about this, like love doesn't exist. As in, you can't touch love, you can't taste it, you can't see it, you can't put it into a pot and examine it. But love calls everything into existence. And it's very, very key. So when you're walking around, you see lots of people in the world, but really you don't see them. They're just objects. They are functions, right? You're like a cow looking at cars. You know, a cow looks at a car,
A
they watch
cow.
it, yeah, but nothing's going on. Like this is a good analogy for Ireland because in Ireland there are a lot of cows. But when you drive past a cow, it looks up and it watches, but there's nothing going on inside, right? And then it goes back to eating, right? That's how we treat people in daily life. We go into a shop, we just there's like almost this grey, bland existence. But when you love somebody, some individual comes out of that background and you see them in their subjectivity. You see them as an individual. So a friend of mine was once in a train and she forgot her money and she didn't have a ticket. And she was very worried about what the guy would say. She was going from Connecticut into New York. And this big burly conductor comes up to her and says, "Ticket, please." And she gets very nervous and says, "I'm really sorry. I don't have a ticket and I don't have any money." And he looked at her and he probably felt sorry for her and he said, "Listen, love, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it." And they got talking and they sat and they talked for about 20 minutes and they shared pictures of their children. They had jokes together and he went on. And at the very end, when she was getting off the train, she saw the conductor and she said to him, "Listen, I really appreciate that. I'm really sorry." And he said to her, "It's okay." He says, "You know what? It's just nice to be seen." Now, he's seen by thousands of people every day, but merely as someone who is part of this system, a one-dimensional man who helps the world run. But he felt that she had seen him as a subject. So love calls people into existence. And this has a theological resonance because at the beginning in Genesis, there is a formless void, and God calls out of that void animals and people and beauty. So that's kind of what love does. Love looks at this void of stuff and draws out individuals or causes as having singular and infinite value. Love does not exist. Love calls everything into existence. But of course, once you give up the idea of love existing and you simply give yourself to love and you experience it bringing stuff into existence, it feels like the most preeminently existing of all things.
You know, it's interesting. Like in college, there was always that couple who was always fighting,
Hmm.
who was spent most of their time discussing their relationship, like working through it.
Yeah,
And it's as if the relationship becomes an object. My relationship, our relationship, the relationship. Obviously, you have to work at these things, but
yeah.
you can see it sometimes in a relationship when it's become the object in the middle of the room that then
Yes,
has to be discussed, poked, prodded, analyzed.
exactly. And also, when we purely kind of lust after somebody, we reduce them to their physicality, and love and lust are interconnected. But when
Wait,
we
say more about that.
well, oh, that'll definitely be in conversation number 3. But in a sense,
Teaser.
that's a teaser. Yes, so you'll continue to listen in. But to love someone is to see them as well, to treat them like an icon, not an idol. To treat someone as an idol is to treat them as their pure objectivity, what you see, or what their personality's like, or whatever. An icon is interesting because an icon is visible. You can touch an icon, you can see it. But an icon draws the gaze beyond the visible into the invisible. When you treat something as an icon, you're drawn into the other beyond objectivity. So, for example, in a concentration camp during the Second World War, the guards would have known more about some of the prisoners than their own loved ones. The guards would have had information about height, color of eyes, color of hair, previous occupation. That's a type of knowledge. But a loved one knows that individual in a way that the guards never could. They know them iconically. They are drawn into something that transcends the objective. So an icon is both physical and visible. So that's the part, that's more like lust. There's something that you really enjoy and desirous about the other. But that objectivity also brings you into the infinite complexity of the other. And I think you can only talk about loving someone whenever you've really hit that dimension of the iconic.
Okay, keep going.
Okay,
I know
well,
you have more.
oh yeah. So that was the first one. The idea that, let's not talk about love as existing, but love as calling all things into existence.
Part 1, cows
Cows,
looking at cars.
cows gazing at cars.
Cows gazing at cars. Sounds like an indie band.
Yeah, that's
By
it.
the way.
Let's start an indie band. Kristen, you and me. This is
Cows gazing at cars.
I'll be the dancer because I can't sing or play instruments. The second one.
Okay.
Oh yeah, is love is not sublime. Love is what renders somebody or some cause sublime.
How do you define sublime? I love that word, by the
Oh
way.
yeah, it's beautiful, and it's actually I'm picking it very precisely because to idealize somebody is to say you are perfect. There's no imperfection in you. To idealize is to think literally the person you're going out with is objectively the most beautiful person in the world, and they are, they would win every beauty contest or whatever. So there's no imperfection, and that's quite powerful. But ultimately, you're putting somebody on a pedestal that will be oppressive to them and destructive at the end of the day. But to sublimate somebody is to say you are perfect in your imperfections. You are perfect in all of your fears and anxieties as well as all the good stuff. To sublimate someone, and this theologically, this is called incarnation. Incarnation is not some esoteric idea. It can help us understand what love is. Incarnation says that this fragile, fleshly frame is the infinite, is the manifestation of the absolute. And so love, to sublimate, to say something is sublime, is not to idealize something, to say it's perfect, is to say that it is perfect in its imperfection. And just as, the Bible theologically make a distinction saying there's nothing about the incarnation that you can see. There's no, and Kierkegaard talks about this, there's no glint in Christ's eye that will say, oh, this is the absolute. It's in a sense a mode of relating to. So in love, we could completely agree about somebody on every aspect of them. But you love them, say, and I don't. So for you, that all of that stuff that takes on this infinite value, this depth and this density that it doesn't for me. So to say that love renders something or someone sublime is to say that love takes the grit and grime of the world, takes finitude, takes all of that seriously and invests it with infinite worth.
So you think about like a date, like a speed dating or a dating site, or the way that often it works where you present the best image of yourself.
Yeah.
And everybody's on their best behavior, and we're in a nice restaurant.
Yeah. Yeah.
That actually what you're looking for, what you're searching for is someone who you can love and know all of it.
Yes. Yes. And in fact, and the thing I'm really excited about talking about in the next conversation, but is this idea that actually to love someone is to actually embrace the bad side of them and the difficulties and love. So of course you're not going to say that in your speed dating. You're not going to give them a list of all your problems, right? Don't do that. But when it comes to love, this psychoanalyst Lacan said, love is giving someone something you do not have and they do want it. And what he means by that is what you do not have is your lack, your brokenness, your unknowing. That's your lack. So you're giving someone what you do not have, which is your weakness, your brokenness, and in a sense they don't want it. Because you want to go out with someone who's brilliant and powerful and wonderful. That's what makes you attracted to them. But in love, you give this broken part of yourself to another, and they learn to love it. And two people exchange those things. So yeah, that's kind of like sublimation, is whenever all of that's brought into it. So the options are not, I either idealize someone or the person's just like everybody else. That isn't the two options. The third option is this person who is like everybody else is also unlike everybody else. That is the weird, beautiful thing about love, is it kind of doesn't idealize and it doesn't make everything mundane, It somehow makes the mundane sacred. The profane is sacred in its very profanity.
It's interesting that as a parent, you do this intuitively with your kids.
Yeah.
Your kids are sublime.
Yep.
That's a good word for it. This kid who has all their little quirks and habits and frustrations isn't just another kid. This kid is somehow the stars exploding in the universe in a skin bag, as the Zen masters say.
Yeah.
Like all of it jammed into this kid who lights me up on the inside like I can't even explain.
That's it. So Paul Tillich had a beautiful way of describing this, and I think it's My Search for Absolutes, this book.
Oh yeah, with the drawings.
Oh yeah,
that's a good one. I just read that. It's a good one.
Beautiful book. But he talks about it might be the dynamics of faith actually, but how there's two types of faith for him. He says partly faith is this absolute commitment to the world, to the infinite value of the world. You know, in Hebrews it says faith is being sure of what you hope for and certain of what you do not see. So what does that mean? Well, to be sure of what you hope for is you hope that the world, is meaningful, has value, has depth. You might hope that, but intellectually, you don't know. But in your heart, you're sure. So it's not that you believe it in your head. In fact, you could disbelieve it in your head, but your heart just treats the world as infinitely valuable without a shadow of a doubt, being certain of what you do not see. The second bit is you cannot see infinite value and worth. You cannot objectively say why your child is the most beautiful child and most wonderful child in the world. You can't see that.
I haven't met all the childs.
Yes, but you're absolutely certain of it.
Yes.
You're certain. So faith is this interesting thing which is absolute radical commitment existentially to the depth and density of the world without epistemological affirmation.
Okay, unpack epistemological, how we know things.
Yes.
So slow that down for all of us mortals.
Well, there's a weird thing I've noticed today where people think faith is a form of belief without substantial evidence. So you have faith that, there'll still be cheese in the fridge. Somebody might have eaten it. I don't know, but I have faith that it's going to be there, right? So that
Did you say cheese in the fridge?
Cheese in the fridge, yes. Good example. Yeah, I like cheese. Yeah, I eat a lot of cheese sandwiches. I'm not much of a cook. But so you have faith because you don't have the evidence. But for the Apostle Paul, it's completely different. Faith has nothing to do with the intellectual. It's nothing to do with belief in something that has a lack of evidence. Faith is a commitment despite any intellectual knowledge. So in the same way, and this brings us to the third element of love, you could say that love is not meaningful. Love is what brings meaning into the world. In other words, if you believe the world is meaningful, that at the end of the universe, we'll all be unified together,
there's some arc, there's some story, there's some trajectory, there's some mega point.
Exactly.
This is headed somewhere.
Exactly. And if you've written books on it and you've preached on it and you believe that, you believe it 100%, right? But you do not love, you cannot help but experience the world as meaningless. But alternatively, if you don't believe the universe has an arc or a meaning or an overarching story, you don't at all. You actually think that's rubbish. But you love, you cannot help but experience the world as meaningful. So love is not about intellectual affirmation about the meaning of the world. Love is about an existential commitment to meaning in the world. So for Paul Tillich, that's kind of faith. But then he says there's two types of faith. And this is really interesting. He says there's a diabolical form of faith, which is where you raise something up as the ideal, the most beautiful thing in the world, that you'll live or die for. Like patriotism. We'll take patriotism. You might say, my country, right or wrong. And you will live and you'll die for your country. That's a form of faith because you're committing yourself, your entire body and soul to something. But he says it's diabolical because you're raising something that is purely finite to the realm of the infinite. And then Paul Tillich says there's a different type of faith. He says there's a faith, and we'll take patriotism again, where you say, my country, I will live and I will die for my country. And my country stands for the ideals of freedom, of democracy, and of justice. And so if any government stands against those, I will live and I will die to defend those things. And Tillich says that's actually a profound form of faith, because you're still giving yourself to something finite, which is your country, whatever. You're still giving yourself to something that's physical and is there, but you're giving yourself to the transcendental element, which is freedom, justice, democracy. Those are not things you can touch, taste, or see. Those are values that inspire us. And putting it into the language I used previously, it's the difference between idolatrous faith, where you think your child is literally the most beautiful child in the world and would win all the pageants if you put your child into them, right? Or your child is the most beautiful child in the world, because you enter into the subjectivity of your child in all of her wonder and all of her struggles and all of her beauty and all of her fears, and all of that comes together in a way where you cannot say anything but you are the most beautiful child in the world. That's I think faith at its best.
You've used the word existential a couple of times.
Oh yes.
For people who are not familiar with that term,
Yeah.
and you used it in reference to epistemological.
Yes.
How do you break all that down for?
Yeah. So in a sense, you could say there's a difference between what you believe and how you believe. So what you believe is intellectual, and how you believe is kind of existential, how you interact with the world. So interestingly, within religion, some religion, what's important is what you believe. So I might say to somebody, do you believe in God? And they say yes. And then if I think that's a good belief, I walk away. But, I don't know how they believe that. There's a saying in Europe, Americans, you've got to love them. Otherwise, they'll bomb you, right? Now, it's not true. It's not true. But what you find is, what you realize, of course, the joke is, well, you have to love them because otherwise they'll kill you, right? But sometimes theology is like that. You say to someone, do you believe in God? You go, yes. And then I stop. But then maybe if I asked why, they'd say, well, I grew up in a family that were strong believers. And what was that like? Well, I mean, if I said I didn't believe in God, I was in trouble.
Kicked out of the tribe.
Kicked out of the tribe. And so what they do is they repress the reasons for the belief. So you believe in God, but you believe in God for terrible reasons, destructive reasons.
Sometimes reasons and sometimes reasons that the person has no idea.
No idea about.
Yeah.
If you bring a kid into analysis and you say to a child, do you love your daddy? Kid says, I love my daddy. Oh, do you everything's good with your daddy? Yes. And you're scared of your daddy? No, right? That's fine. But then ask the teddy bear. What does teddy bear think of daddy? Oh, no, teddy bear doesn't like daddy at all. Teddy bear thinks daddy's an idiot, right? It's not the kid who needs psychoanalysis, it's the teddy bear. The teddy bear has the problem, right? Now, what is that? The teddy bear is expressing the repressed beliefs of the child. The child doesn't even know the reasons why they think what they think, because they've had to repress them because they're so scared of sharing them. So what you have to do is you have to psychoanalyze the teddy bear. In the same way, we can have beliefs and not know where they are, but they come out in our actions. Don't ask me what I believe. Ask why I overeat, why I cry at night, why I'm anxious about going outside. That's telling you the truth. So for Kierkegaard, religion is not the what of belief, which is epistemological, what you believe. Christianity is concerned with the how of belief, which is existential. How does your belief humanize you?
How does it shape you? How does it form you?
Yes.
How does it order your steps?
Yes. How do you engage in the world? How do you interact with it? This is actually my entire vocation, my entire work, and my last book was trying to explore Christianity in this existential way rather than purely in this epistemological way.
Yeah. Oh, man. Okay, so let's go. Is there more? Wait.
Well, those are the three main things.
Yes.
And by the way, the reason why I like those is because in the same way I go like, God and love, let's not say they exist, let's say they insist. That's the words of John Caputo, a philosopher I really like.
But they don't exist, they insist?
Yes. They call us, and they call things into existence. Let's not say they're sublime, they render the world sublime. And let's not say that they're meaningful, they rather bring meaning into the world. But of course, the trick is this. when you give yourself over to the what we call the existential aspect of love, you give yourself over to love, then you discover that love seems to be the most preeminently existing, sublime, and
Yes.
meaningful of all realities. So weirdly, in the very act of giving up the objectivity of love and gauging in the act of love, you strangely experience this sense that you're experiencing something more real than reality itself.
Yes. 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 So this is why for so many people discussions get so awkward and strange, is because they are discussions that exist in the subject-object discussions.
Yeah,
We're standing around analyzing this
yeah.
when we're discussing the album instead of listening to it.
Yes, there's a little anecdote where the Italian soldiers in the First World War were ready to go over the top to meet the enemy, and the commander says, "Right, lads, over the top," and nobody moves, and then he shouts it really loud. He's got this really deep voice. He bellows it, "Right, lads, over the top," and nobody moves, and he says it a third time, right, it really guttural. This incredible voice, this incredibly strong voice, shouts, "Lads, over the top." And these are Italians, right? So they just look at each other, and then they look at the sergeant, and they say, "What a wonderful voice he has. What a wonderful voice." Now, that for me is, treating the voice as objective. You're studying it, you're looking at it, but you're not hearing the subjective call of the voice.
Yeah.
Now, that's what Kierkegaard says about, music lovers. He says, you could analyze music and tell you everything about it, treat it as an object, but you don't get it. You're not hearing, you're not letting it touch your soul. You're not letting it breathe within you. So, I think it was Meister Eckhart who basically said, it doesn't matter if, Christ rose from the dead 1,000 times in reality, if that does not happen in my subjectivity. In other words, there's no Lazareans walking around, but people say Lazarus rose from the dead. There's a sense in which subjective and objective have to intertwine, which is, of course, a theological concept that we explored in the 4th episode, actually, of the last one. So that's that they intertwine in a way that touches us, that moves us, and that's why parables are so interesting. A command, if I'm a sergeant in an army and I tell you to close a door, you have to do it, whether you like me or not, whether you're a nice person or not. I make a command and I tell you to do it. But if I say to you, "Oh, it's a little bit chilly in here. It's very cold." If you're a nice person, you'll go and close the door. And if you don't care, you won't. The one commands and the other is for those with ears to hear. If you're ready to hear it and you hear what's being said. And parables are like that. Parables are not a command discourse. They don't tell you what to think. They rather invite you to sensitize you to a call, to respond to a call.
It's interesting. I'm finishing 3 or 4 months of talking about this, What is the Bible book?
Oh, yes, yeah.
And 95% of the interviews are, well, what is the Bible? Like, what's the... And my answer is, you're invited to be caught up in something.
Yes. Yeah.
You're invited to dance with it. You're invited to hear its invitation and say yes.
Yes.
What is this story? Is it history? Is it poetry? Is it fact? Is it fiction? Not interesting questions to me.
Yeah.
You enter into it and see what happens to you.
Yes.
That's what you do with this.
Yeah.
Because that's what you do with all great stories.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about the biblical text is that, people are still reading it. Like the moment you defend a piece of work, like why should someone read the Odyssey? Why should somebody read Shakespeare? And you start to argue why. I think we're missing the point, because the point is people still do. The question is not why should you read it, but why do we read it? Because we do, because there's lots of people who read these works. And then you go, oh, because some people hear within it a call. They hear within it something that calls us to be more human, to look out for our neighbour, to become to become human's an important thing because we're all
To become
inhuman.
human is an important thing?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good line.
Well, dogs don't become dogs, right? There's not such a thing as in-dogness, right? We don't say, oh, that dog is very in-dogness, right? Dogs are dogs, cats are cats, rocks are rocks. But humans can be inhuman. That's a very interesting thing, another theological claim is, this idea of Christ being fully God and fully human. And we think, oh, fully God means very distant from us and fully human means very like us. But what if fully God is like a claim that Christ is as different from us as the farthest star? And to say Christ is fully human is to say Christ is as far from us as the smallest quark. That actually, to become human is an incredible challenge. Again, I want to strip this of any metaphysical content. And by that, I mean, I'm not making claims as to what literally, I'm just talking about these terms are theological ways of describing what the poets described. And what the poets described are similar ways of what the theologians are describing. The theologian you'll know, Karl Rahner, he once said, he was asked, what happens if you meet someone who, say, is a Buddhist, who has a life that reminds you of Christ, that just lives in this beautiful, graceful way? And he said, well, I would call him an anonymous Christian. So this is an interesting term, but he got a critique. Someone said to him, well, that's kind of offensive because you're saying that really they're a Christian, but they don't know it. And then Karl Rahner, this is the interesting bit. People don't talk about the second bit, they talk about the first bit. His answer to that is fascinating. He says, oh, no. He says, if a Buddhist came to me and said to me, you're an anonymous Buddhist, I would go, oh, it's beautiful. Because, see, for me, he says, as a theologian who's immersed my life in that discourse, the word Christian is the best word I've got. It's this beautiful word that is a container of so much beauty. But for a Buddhist, the best word they've got is Buddhism. So what he's saying is, yes, I have my language and I'm looking at things from this discourse. But I don't want, and I of course impose it on the world. What else can I do? Those are the glasses that I wear. But I understand that other people have glasses they're wearing and that they see me through those glasses. And so in some respects, when I see what the best theologians are doing, and there's not many I like, but in the best ones, and I look at what the poets are saying about love, I'm like, oh my goodness. These are, in a sense, they're exploring similar things. They're expressing things. And in fact, the richness is whenever they cross-pollinate. When we can take a word like incarnation and say, let's not keep it just within the Christian camp. Let's take the richness of that idea of the finite being infused with the infinite and bring that into dialogue with the best poetry and philosophy on love. And this enriches everybody. Disciplines like theology and philosophy and literature are all impoverished when they don't hang out together.
Oh, my word. Okay, so we should probably land this plane at some point here.
Yep.
What, to the couple who are struggling with each other, to the person who would love to have a partner, to the person who just found out they've been cheated on, to the person, talk to me about love and the everyday struggles.
Yeah. I'll say one quick thing that comes to mind. This is from a philosopher, Alain Badiou. He wrote a beautiful... Alain Badiou, who's a French philosopher. He wrote a beautiful little book called In Praise of Love. Most of his work is impenetrable, but this is a very, very nice book. But, he talks about how today we want to protect ourselves from the falling in love. So Tinder things and dating sites that promise that, in a sense, you can have the love without the falling. You can find out someone who fits with you, who likes the same things as you. We'll take out all the danger of love, all of the risk of love, all of the horror of love. And he says kind of the problem is you end up not with love. When you take away the falling, you take away the love. And so for people who are struggling, who of us have not struggled at one time or another in love? My greatest, struggles in the past were to do with that, and maybe in the future. People who are listening to this, who are struggling with all of the things you said, first of all, they took the courageous step of entering into love, where you can live and you can die by that sword, where you will feel things that you do not want to feel. You will feel more alive than ever, and you will feel more suffering than ever. But that's kind of that's the courage to be. That's the risk we have to take. And the big challenge for us all, although sometimes we have to take time out, is to not let our past experiences do not try to insulate ourselves against the pain of love. There is no way to do it. If you try to insulate yourself from all the suffering of love, you will find yourself insulating yourself from love itself.
It is fundamentally risky.
It's fundamentally risky.
And if you remove the risk, you remove the love.
Yeah. And then I definitely in the third conversation, if we get to that, I really want to land this in a personal way.
Oh, okay.
I want to talk about how this abstract stuff about existence, the sublime and the meaningful, can really impact us practically. But I think, yes, the lesson out of this is when you have faith, when you have love, you experience the world or an individual or a cause as having infinite value and depth and beauty in their imperfections. And when you open yourself up to that, you inherently open yourself up to risk. And we need to be there for each other whenever we fall. We need to love and care for those people who are struggling because of love. And if we're struggling, we need a community around us because it's painful. It's incredibly painful. People, I can't believe that we get to work in the mornings, that people get up and they do 9 to 5 and they make food for their kids and they watch TV and they go out for walks, because when you find out the battles that people have fought in the realm of love, you were surprised that anyone could get up in the morning. You're surprised that anyone could open the door, could take the duvet cover from the top of their head. It's incredible. It's incredible. People are fighting great battles and we don't see it because we just see them working in the shop. That person who you're buying a chocolate bar of, they could be fighting incredible battles, experiencing incredible sufferings and love. And of course, you can't ask everybody, how are you doing? That would be ridiculous. But we can sensitize ourselves to the other and realize that even if we don't get to know them, they are a person who has probably struggled with love, to find it or to move on from someone or to find someone, and that it's helpful for us to remember that.
I love your story about the man on the train who says it's just nice to be seen.
It's just nice to be seen.
Yeah, that's really, really powerful. So that's an introduction to love, part 1.
And thank you, Rob, for doing this. Isn't it love fun that we can have these conversations.
Okay, then we'll do another one. Grace and peace, everyone.